Let's talk some college football. Uh, my takes from this weekend. I mean, first of all, listen, I'm an LSU fan unabashedly. Uh, I definitely root for them. If we're talking about other programs, I certainly root for my home team, which would be the Miami Hurricanes. But when it comes to college football, I pick favorites here and there, and it's no secret I root for LSU. And yeah, they totally fell apart in this game. LSU got their ass kicked by Texas A&M, and it looked like for a while they could have had the game in hand, could have had a bigger lead at 17-7 at half, and then Texas A&M changed quarterbacks and opened up a can on them and outscored them. I think Texas A&M scored 31 points in the last 23 minutes of the game. It was insane. So not not complaining about the loss. Texas A&M deserved to win. But my overall take is I don't think this puts Texas A&M in a new class. I know everybody wants to put them in the top 10 this week, and I'm not prepared to do that yet. I mean, Texas A&M's been the funny part about this is Texas A&M and LSU very much mirror images of each other. Super talented teams, but they can never figure out how to avoid mistakes and actually do the things you have to do to win and play consistently. And both teams are kind of all over the place. And so I think, if you have to bring in a quarterback at halftime of the game in order to then start playing well when you're playing a game at home like that gives me some concerns about you. But look, they won the game and dominated, so I give them a lot of credit. But as far as them being in the top 10, I'm not there yet, and I would still keep Notre Dame ahead of them. As far as my playoff, kind of going forward, my playoff scenario for them is, I think as long as Texas A&M continues to win, I still think Notre Dame will stay ahead of them in the rankings, even when the CFP rankings come out in about a week. But I think if Texas A&M were to beat Texas and or win the SEC championship game, then I think Texas A&M gets ahead of them. My other take from this weekend, don't play Vanderbilt. Don't schedule them. Don't do it, because they are a problem. They've already taken down Virginia Tech and Alabama, and they came within an onside kick of taking down Texas this weekend. So they're legit. They're going to be a bowl team for sure, and I wouldn't want to play them down near the end of the season, because that team is well coached. That quarterback brings it every week, and they are scary. So you don't want any part of it. And honestly, like when you're looking at the rankings, I think beating Vanderbilt is actually a pretty good win. If you're asking me to be honest, I think Texas beating them is actually goes in the plus column for them. And Texas doesn't really have a lot of big wins. So if I'm being honest, like Vanderbilt's probably their best win. Let's see what else. Indiana is for real. Ladies and gentlemen, Indiana is here to stay. They beat the hell out of Nebraska, and then Nebraska came within, one or two drives of beating Ohio State at Ohio State. So, Indiana is, they're going to be a problem. And I expect that they're going to win. I think they're going to win their next two games and be 10-0 playing at Ohio State. And that's going to be a scary game. Definitely Ohio State will be favored, but that's going to be kind of scary for them. Oregon beat the crap out of Illinois. I think 38-9 was the final score. And man, you looked up, I flipped to that game one time. It was 21-3 at the end of the first quarter. And I was like, well, this is done. So I think Oregon probably has the best chance to go undefeated in the regular season, at least. Oregon and Miami, either one. But I think, where would I rank the teams? And I think me personally, I would still I'd put Georgia number one. I think what Georgia did, coming back in the second half against Alabama like they did, and then beating the crap out of Texas, both games on the road, I think those two things are more impressive than anything that anybody else has done. So to me, like if you're asking me, okay, more impressive, like it's Georgia. I don't think there's any question about it. Now, are there concerns about the quarterback? Sure. There's concerns about the quarterback, concerns about the offense. All I know is if they play like that, nobody else is beating them. But I think Oregon is the more well-rounded, more complete team. I've seen more from Oregon where they don't have a whole lot of weaknesses from what I can see. And it looks like physically they can hold up even against the best teams. Ohio State has, one of the most talented rosters in the sport, and Oregon hung right in there with them. Now they easily could have lost that game, and that's why I would put Georgia number one. But Oregon is no joke, and I liked Oregon and Texas before the season. I think Oregon is delivering. Texas, we'll see. But let's talk about Texas for a second. Texas basically has like their best. I really think their best win was just the other. They beat Vanderbilt a couple days ago. That was their best win, and so Texas doesn't have a whole lot on their resume going for it. So we'll see what happens. They're probably going to have to win out and beat Texas A&M because, I mean, if they have a second loss and they really don't have anything else on their resume, like they're in danger of not making it. And I know that sounds crazy to some people, but I'm like, me personally, this is how I do the rankings is I am a resume guy and eye test. I put those two things together. Like if I'm ranking the top 12, like any these undefeated teams that have beaten no one, Miami, BYU, Iowa State, Pittsburgh, like they're not in my top. They would not be in my top 5 because I'm not ranking you that high until you actually beat someone. And everybody's like, well, that team, they're undefeated. It's hard to go undefeated. It's hard to go undefeated unless you play a shitty schedule. Like if you're not playing a real schedule, then I'm really not interested in what you have to say there. What else? Or Ohio State. Ohio State struggled, could not run the ball against Nebraska, which is disturbing. I think Nebraska's defense is pretty good, but you Ohio State, you've got one of the most expensive, most talented rosters in the sport. You shouldn't have a problem running the ball. So this is going to be really fascinating, this game, Ohio State against Penn State, Saturday at noon, because, Penn State is good enough to beat them. And the game it's in Happy Valley at Penn State. So, we'll see if Penn State's quarterback plays, but I kind of like, I think if they can't, if they're having, like Ohio State is having offensive problems or offensive line problems, if they're having that and they can't run the ball, Penn State is capable of beating them because Penn State is every bit as physical and tough on the line of scrimmage. They always send, linemen to the NFL, offensive and defensive linemen to the NFL. So Penn State, yeah, they're pretty good, and Ohio State better bring it or they could be in deep trouble. One thing that bothered me from this weekend, I saw, okay, LSU lost, and I just looked at the playoff predictor before I came on here. LSU still has a 21% chance of making the playoff. And, it just comes out anytime we still have not gotten rid of the mentality that these teams lose, and it's like, oh, well, that's it, they're done. Danny Cannell sends out a tweet, LSU's eliminated. It's like, no, they're not. Like, no, they're not. Like, I'm here to tell you, like, the only teams like in the, there's very few teams like in the major conferences that are eliminated. Like, I can tell you a few things. Like, Florida State is out, right? They're not going to the playoff. USC is not going to the playoff. Like, if you have 3 losses, you're probably not going to the playoff, but, it'll be iffy. But all the other teams, like, if you have 2 losses or less, you're still alive. All those teams are still alive. I don't understand why people continue to do this and try to find definitive ways to say, no, it's going to be this way or it's going to be that way. College football is the one sport you can't say anything like that. Like, there's no way to tell that. So, yeah, LSU still has a shot. Now, they've got to win out, right? They're on the ropes. They have no margin for error. So that's the easiest way to look at that. And as far as, looking at the 12-team playoff right now, like there's things that happen right now that I just didn't expect. I did not expect we'd have 2 Big 12 teams that were undefeated, Iowa State and BYU. I did not see, we'd have Pittsburgh and Miami both undefeated in the ACC, right? So, and Indiana, like no one saw Indiana coming. I did not think Indiana was going to be 8-0. So this playoff race is going to be super tight for the last spot. And, but that being said, I wonder, like, I know everyone's going to complain and all the media is going to get upset. There's SEC bias and all this nonsense, but I wonder how upset we're really going to be at the team who doesn't get in the playoff, because I've got news. Whoever doesn't get in the playoff has no chance. They had no chance of winning the championship anyway. There's probably maybe 5 or 6 teams that could win it right now, win the championship, not just get into the playoff. And, the last 3, 4 teams to get in the playoff are going to be irrelevant. It's not going to matter. So, yeah, I think that's insane. But yeah, that's my that's my college football rundown. I think LSU blew a really big opportunity there, but it's still not over. It's still not over. They were doing this on the other show. I think Georgia's win against Texas is the best win. And I think, I know teams have had some bad losses, but the worst loss is still Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois. I mean, Northern Illinois right now is 4-4. And I don't even know, I don't know they're going to be bowl eligible. I have no idea. But they're not a good team. And Notre Dame lost to them at home, and that's pretty bad. Yes, I know Alabama lost to Vanderbilt, but I'm sorry, Vanderbilt is probably going to a bowl game. They're an SEC team. Whatever you think of Vanderbilt, they're still an SEC team. That's better than I know. It's people hate this, but sorry, the SEC is still the best conference. Okay, college football top 12. So, look, disclaimer. I'm probably going to contradict myself at some point during these rankings. I don't know any other way to do it. I am a believer in who did you play, who did you beat, and I don't fall for just we're undefeated, so that's it. You have to be ranked higher because you're undefeated. Like, if you haven't beaten anybody, you're not going to be as high in my rankings as you would in the AP or probably even the CFP. So yeah. So here we go. I'm going to explain as best I can, and we'll see how it goes. So I have Oregon number 1, just like the AP poll does. Look, they're undefeated. They have one of the best wins, even though it's only a 1-point win at home against Ohio State. Is this the best team? I'm not sure if they're the best team, but I believe that there's an argument to be made that they're the best team. And they're still undefeated. I've got them at number 1. I put Georgia number 2. I know Georgia's got a loss, but to me, the 2 most impressive things that have been done this season are Georgia coming back against Alabama after getting killed in the first half of that game, and then going to Texas and absolutely destroying them. So those 2 things, nobody else has got that on their resume. I flirted with putting the number 1. I just couldn't quite do it. Because that first half against Alabama was pretty bad. But like, if you ask me who am I putting my money on to win the title, yeah, I'll put it on Georgia. But I got them number 2 in the poll. Ohio State, I'm putting them at 3. I think Ohio State going to Oregon, basically they screw up the 2-minute drive on the last couple of plays there. Otherwise, they have a field goal to win the game at Autzen Stadium. So, they didn't look very good last week against Nebraska. And, this is obviously going to change drastically depending on what happens in a few days at Penn State. But, I feel like I've got Ohio State 3rd. I feel like they're good enough to win the national championship. But I just put them 3rd. And honestly, they easily could have won that Oregon game and be number 1. So we're splitting hairs between these 3 teams. Are kind of, I feel like, kind of separated a little bit. And these 3 teams, I think, can definitely win the title. 4, I put Texas. I know this one is probably one of the more questionable ones on here. Texas's resume. I mean, that's it. Listen, nobody wants to believe it, but going to Vanderbilt and beating them, that's a pretty good win. They beat Vanderbilt. They beat the hell out of Oklahoma. They blew out all the other teams. But they got smoked at home by Georgia. And, if it was anybody else other than Georgia, I don't think I'd have Texas ranked this high that they lost to. But I still think Texas is really, really good. And even though that loss was bad, it wasn't as bad as some of the other losses that plenty of other teams have. So I got them 4. Number 5, this may surprise some people. I put BYU. Look, nobody. This is a resume play right here. BYU's undefeated. They went to. I know Central Florida's not the best team, but they went out to Orlando and kicked their ass. They have a win against SMU. SMU only has one loss, and they beat the crap out of Kansas State. And that's one of the best 2 or 3 wins in the country so far this year. Is BYU just smoking Kansas State like they did, because Kansas State's that's the only game Kansas State has lost. So I think you got to give credit to BYU here, and I just feel like their resume is better than all of these undefeated teams except for Ohio State and Oregon. 6, I put Penn State. I struggled with where to put Penn State because they're undefeated. They have the win against Illinois, who's still ranked, and they have they went out to USC. And I know USC has, lost some games, but that's still a tough thing to do, to go on the road, especially halfway across the country, and win a game, especially when you're down by 14 points. So I give them credit for that, but I really struggled with, they don't have like a win that's just awesome that you can really shake a stick at. And obviously, if they don't beat Ohio State this weekend, then they won't be sitting in this place on Sunday. But yeah, that was a tough one, and but I just felt like their resume doesn't stack up. I think BYU's resume is better. So that's where I ranked them. I put Texas A&M 7th. Yeah, I know Notre Dame beat them, but first game of the season, where they're trying to figure it out with a new coach. Like, I'm going to give you time to improve. And Texas A&M's win against LSU was, it's a really good win against LSU, but it's not amazing like people are making it out. I know I have them ranked pretty high to be saying that, but they were in trouble in that game and needed to bring in their backup quarterback halfway through the third quarter when they were losing the game in order to win. So I'm not. I'm not going to go crazy about Texas A&M, but that is a good win, just from a resume perspective. And I feel like their loss is a pretty good loss, that first week. I put Tennessee after them at 8. 3, 6, 7, 8. Yep. So I put Tennessee 8. This has struggled with, because some people have Tennessee 5th or 4th, and I just like Tennessee's win against Alabama is a really good win. Their loss against Arkansas, it's not great, but it's not a terrible loss. But I just felt like, go back to resume, Texas A&M has the LSU win, and I feel like that's what carries them over Tennessee. I think the LSU win is just a little bit better than the Alabama win, so that's where I put Tennessee. Jeremy, where's the other undefeated teams? Okay, so I put Miami 9th, and look, Miami's undefeated, so I give them credit for that, but their resume is pretty bad. And plus they were down 10 points to Virginia Tech, had to come back to beat them, and hung on because of, a ref's call could have, lost that game for them. And then they're down by 25 against Cal. I mean, those are not good performances. Yes, I understand they're undefeated, but I mean, I'm sorry, their resume is just terrible. So, I put them there because they're undefeated, and I think they're really talented. But resume wise, they don't even deserve to be ranked here. I put Notre Dame 10th. I think Notre Dame has a good win against Texas A&M. I think that's great, first win of the season, but that loss is really bad. That's the worst loss in the country, by far. I don't even think it's close. So that's what kept me from putting them ahead of Miami. But their win is good enough to me to have them ranked where they are. And they've got a great chance to move up, because they should be able to win all the rest of their games. 11, I put Indiana. This is where it got down to really tough resumes between Indiana, Clemson, and Iowa State. And I mean, Indiana's, that win against Nebraska and Washington, like, I feel like that's just a little bit better than Clemson, who's, all Clemson's wins are mostly against losing teams. They got smoked by Georgia, which most of the teams in this area of the poll would get smoked by Georgia anyway. And Iowa State doesn't have any, there's no Nebraska or USC Nebraska or Washington on Iowa State's schedule. And, I know Iowa State and BYU were undefeated in the same conference, but like I said, BYU's got those 2 wins that are pretty good. And so, yeah, so that's why I put Indiana 11. I put Clemson 12 because I still feel like Clemson is a little bit better than Iowa State, but still bad resumes here, which is why these undefeated, we've got undefeated teams down near, out of the top 10 because I just like, I'm sorry, man. You got to show me, man. You got to show me something. You got to beat somebody. You got to play some significant games. And I mean, just looking at the teams now, I mean, I don't know that BYU is going to get another significant game to really prove themselves until the conference championship game. Same thing with Miami and Clemson. They're going to go through these schedules and they're not really playing a great team, either one. And so they're probably going to play each other and they're going to get into the playoff and, same kind of deal. I mean, Iowa State finishes the season with Kansas State, the last regular season games. Excuse me. So that I think could really help them. But yeah, I mean, just kind of spinning it forward. I mean, obviously Oregon's going to stay number one unless they do something really drastic. Georgia's got the two huge games coming up with Ole Miss and Tennessee. So, if they win both of those, win the conference championship, I could see them being ranked number one at the end of the season because their resume would improve. Ohio State and Penn State, like whoever wins this weekend is probably going to be third in the next poll because that win's going to be huge. Probably bigger win for Ohio State since it's on the road. Texas and Texas A&M could play each other near the end of the season, so that would be mighty interesting. But Texas A&M's got to go to South Carolina on the road this week, so that could be, you never know. But yeah, so I think that's a trend we're seeing in college football now. A team wins a big game, they get scheduled the next week in prime time against another really good team, and they probably lose. So we'll see how it goes. They got to go to South Carolina at night to beat them. So we'll see what happens with that. But I'm really looking forward to the LSU Alabama game because I think the winner of that game has a chance if they win out to get themselves into the top 12. And I didn't put in my poll, but I mean, obviously Boise State is the best group of 5 team. And I don't think that's going to change. And we'll see if enough people lose. Maybe they could actually get themselves ranked in the top 12, even though they're probably in the playoff anyway. But, okay.